We enter 2023 with one war, but the year is ending with three major conflicts, all of which aren't showing any signs of ending. On October 7th, 2023, terror group Hamas crossed over from the Gaza Strip to launch a shockingly coordinated attack by air, water and land on Israel. The deadly terror attack began the war, which has claimed over 19,000 innocent lives so far. The fear that other countries in the Middle East may soon become embroiled in this ongoing conflict in one way or another is real. While Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned Israel's incessant bombing of Palestine's Gaza Strip, he also promised to intensify the offensive in Ukraine. Though Moscow promised a quick victory over Ukraine nearly 2 years ago, no end is there in sight of the fighting which is ongoing. Whether Putin will end this war will depend on the outcome of the elections. On the other hand, Ukraine alliances with the US and Europe could be destabilized further in 2024, putting the future of military aid packages in doubt. There are many other live conflicts stretching both the globe and the alphabet, from Afghanistan all the way to Yemen. And in these times, as Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, predicted long and difficult war, what rings louder is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's message of this not being an era of war. So can there be peace? Can 2024 be that watershed year when the conflicts could end? And joining me first is Yurash. He is a Ukrainian MP. Appreciate your time. I can see you in army fatigues. As we usher in the new year, what do you think will happen? Will that be a year without wars?
All the wars end. The reality is, I'm, beside being a member of parliament, I'm a mobilized soldier, and I'm talking to you from the front lines, where I have a moment and speaking with your amazing nation is a best chance to use that moment to try and tell as much as possible about the realities of this horrific war, which is happening and killing and destroying day in, day out, night in, night out.
Are you hoping that the war will end this year? The coming year, 2024, I
Of course. As soon as Russians leave our country alone, the war will end. And I hope they leave our country alone as soon as possible.
All right, Yurash, I appreciate your time. Let me bring in Dr. C. Rajamohan, Senior Fellow of Asia Society Policy Institute. Dr. Rajamohan, I appreciate your time. 2024 will be also the year which will witness many elections. Before I talk about the war, I want to understand from you, how do you see the things change in democracies in particular?
Look, I think that elections are taking place in many countries. That is true. Many large countries, including India, US, Russia. You have elections in Pakistan, Bangladesh, a whole lot of countries. But I don't think you can draw a general conclusion about democracy around the world. Each country has its own specific set of issues and complexities. So I would say the impact is not on democracy, but like, say, for example, if Trump is elected in the US, there is a certain consequences that will follow in terms of US policy. That will have a great bearing on the international system. No one is betting that President Putin will lose the election, but so I think it's broadly predictable. In Pakistan, we know whatever the talk about elections is, finally the army will select the next prime minister. So in India, the prime minister is so strong that there are very few doubts now of what's going to happen in the elections. So I think you have to take it country by country rather than framing it as a single year of democracy or something in that manner.
Okay, Dr. Rajamohan, ongoing wars, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas, there is a great degree of instability as well. Do you see a new axis emerge in 2024?
Absolutely, and I think in all the three, of course, the US is a key player. So what we are seeing is the sudden kind of destabilization of all the three major theaters in the world. One is Europe, of course. Historically, last 100 years, it's been the the central theater where war and peace have been the principal issues. The peace of last 30, 40 years is shattered. So Russia does not like the existing arrangements in Europe. It thinks that it has been, the deals that were made in 1991 were undone. So therefore, it wants a revision of the European security order, but Europe is not ready to give it. So in a way, what happens next year in these elections will be of consequence. Second theater is the Middle East. Just when we thought Middle East was reasonably stable, we have the Gaza war, and I suspect in the case of Middle East, both Israel and Iran are trying to revise the regional order, and I think that is going to it's already destabilized the system quite significantly. And at this point, it does not look like how this can be stabilized. So we are in for a pretty turbulent era in the Middle East. And then in East Asia, things have not come to shooting yet. But I think the tensions between China and the US on China's claims that it will unify Taiwan with or without peaceful means, China's pressure against the Philippines, China's pressure against India. We've been seeing a slow burn of issues here. But if China tries to take Taiwan, I mean, the US will get directly involved. So unlike in Europe, the US could get withdrawn more directly into conflict with China if China does step forward. But at this point, we have no clue which way the dice is going to roll.
Okay, tell me, who will be the peacemaker in all these wars, sir?
I mean, you are really hopeful. I mean, there will be a peacemaker. I mean, I think Europe, which has had peace for almost 75 years, is struggling to come to a settlement on Ukraine and more broadly an understanding with Russia. In the Middle East, the US is still the main interlocutor between, we saw US is the one which negotiated the hostage release because it still has some leverage with Israel and the Arabs, but it has no leverage with Iran, which is one which is really challenging the existing order. In the East Asia, of course, again, the US is the dominant player in terms of how it can settle things. So I think using word peace is somewhat of a misnomer here. The question is who has the power and the clout to negotiate new arrangements for stabilizing these regions. So I think that's where what the US does is going to be consequential. And whether Russia and China will facilitate that, whether Russia and China will undermine that. At this point, Russia and China are daggers drawn with the United States. So the US capacity to actually get things done is also shaky.
Okay, so let me rephrase it and not talk about peace, but say what will be the nature of these arrangements? Will it be different from what we have seen in the past?
Look, yes, there will be. I mean, that is the point. I mean, in Europe, Russia is saying the existing order needs to be revised. NATO needs to go back to the 1997 borders. And that it needs a sphere of influence in Eastern and Central Europe. But that the Russian desire for such an arrangement is not acceptable to the Central European states. It's not acceptable to the US. So how will they come to a compromise? I mean, but that system has broken down. So when I talk about an arrangement here, there has to be a compromise if neither side wins. So at that point, compromises will have to be made in Russian call for a fundamental division of the European order and the European interest in stable borders. So there, how much of a territory of Ukraine can be sacrificed? Those will be the kind of issues. So the question of sovereignty of Central European states, the question of security of Russia, and the role of the United States and NATO in facilitating that. All these issues are contentious, and I think it's going to be problematic. In Asia, Xi Jinping says he has the right to integrate Taiwan. So how that proceeds, we don't know. The existing arrangements are being broken down. I mean, there's an idea US would respect it, one China policy, and the China would only do peaceful integration of Taiwan. So that is breaking down. We don't know if there's a fresh arrangement can be made. And on top of it, all these are being tested by the emergence of new technologies. The drone warfare we've seen, the rise of artificial intelligence. So how do these technologies affect the military balance? How do the new tactics of the gray zone conflict that we're seeing in Red Sea, how do they undermine deterrence? How do they undermine peace? Those are more structural issues that are going to affect all these processes that we are talked about.
What about India, Dr. Rajmohan?
Sure. I mean, I think we have a situation with China. Now we're into the fourth winter. We have 60,000 troops deployed at 17,000 feet. No resolution in sight yet. So the question is, will 2024 be any better than 2022 and 23? The negotiations with China have been going on, but without no real progress in terms of beyond disengagement in a couple of places, but structurally restoring the status quo ante before 2020 summer. We are nowhere near it. So that's where we are. In the case of Pakistan, we've had a fragile peace. There was a ceasefire in 2021, February. That's largely held, but in the last few weeks, there are signs that might be breaking down. So we have problems there. And meanwhile, it's not just on the land borders. Now with the attacks on the Indian shipping in the Arabian Sea, the maritime frontier too is going to be very, very consequential, because that's where India's trade is going to be affected. India's energy imports are going to be affected. So I think we're beginning to see all these years, India could say, look, there's no real maritime threat, except the Chinese coming into the ocean in a broad way. There is a direct attack on shipping coming into India. So that will play out in the next few days.
All right. Dr. Rajmohan, really appreciate your time. Let me also try and get an Israeli perspective. Limor Bletter, Deputy Consul General Israel, is joining us from Bengaluru. Limor, certainly one question that will be asked because of this ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, will 2024 be the year that will see the end of wars? And that being one of them.
In the end of the day, we're looking for peace. We want to live in peace with our neighbors. We're living in a difficult region. And our goal is definitely to have peace with our neighbors and to have them live well. And right now, unfortunately, the events of the 7th of October, the massacre, the horrible massacre and the invasion of the Hamas terrorists to Israel has deeply created a situation where Israel has to right now to defend itself and to do whatever it can in order to destroy Hamas and to make sure that something like that never happens again. And of course, the situation, Israel is dealing with releasing the hostages, still 129 hostages that are held in Gaza, including children, babies, women, elderly. These people are still there. So we're hoping only for peace. We don't want to fight with anyone. We're not interested in war. And our hope is, first of all, to bring the hostages back, to bring back the safety, the security to the state of Israel, and make sure that something that happened like this will not happen again. And for that, we have to work on destroying Hamas. And of course, we're not only fighting the front with Gaza. We're fighting with Hezbollah. We have the Houthis that are shooting, that are a proxy of Iran, that are always threatening Israel, and they're also firing rockets towards ships and jeopardizing the freedom of trade. So the whole area is right now being mandated by and supported by the Iranian regime, which is only interested in denying that peace and not and fighting Israel, which is representing the free world.
Okay, Ms. Bletter, can Israel-Saudi normalization agreement still happen, or is it a distant dream?
We are interested in peace with anyone that wants to have peace with us. That's the only thing I can. We're not interested in having any enemies, and for us, anyone that wants to do peace with Israel, we would be very happy to. So definitely, if we will have allies for that, we will always be interested. And we've seen how Israel can do peace agreements with the Arab countries. So we're very, very, we're always hopeful to get more to get more warm relationships with whoever we can.
All right, Limor, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.